Chapter 12 Steve's Observation Post. The vehicle slowed down to about 25 miles per hour when I jumped, landing in the bushes that grew along the edge of the tree line, knocking the wind out of me. Once I'd grabbed my composure, realized I had fucked up and had leapt out on the wrong side of the track. Shit. Only one thing for it, going to have to walk back up the trail for about 200 meters and cross over before making my way back to this point, but on the other side of the road. No signs of movement time to get over to the other side. Took a massive jump, and landing on one foot around a third of the way across, steady, a full 360-degree turn on one leg followed by another enormous leap. Had to repeat this 3 times to reach the other side. Perfect. Looking back, the only trace of anyone crossing was 2 semicircular marks in the track. Quick adjustment to the foliage around the edge of the trail to hide the fact someone may have come this way. Glanced down at Mickey. The little detour had cost me 20 minutes. Better get my arse into gear. Learned a long time ago to take a bearing on my compass, pick out an object in the distance. Walk to it before taking another tack. Nothing worse than always looking down at your compass, looking up to find someone pointing a weapon at you. The undergrowth wasn't too thick, so made steady progress, making up valuable time, finally reaching the edge of the woods overlooking the target. A short search uncovered 2 potential locations for the observation post. The first was behind a small grassy mound between 2 giant trees located right on the ridge. The second, a small indent in the ground, a little more to the right and marginally back from the tree line, overgrown by a small green bush which grew over the area, but still allowed sufficient room to crawl underneath, and even gave a good view of the property. The first would be perfect spot, apart from the fact I would be skylined while looking over any object. Plus the camouflage net placed in the front would stick out a mile, so the second location would be home for a while. Better sort out my priorities. The first task, cut away some bush to allow me to crawl into the indent, ensuring any parts chopped away were concealed inside so they couldn't be spotted. Right, a few adjustments to the front, camouflage net in place, and the location was ready. Now to get set up in a position enabling me to scrutinize the target with as little movement as possible. Dragged in my Bergen and took out my binoculars, radio, receiver and notepad to record any significant movements, times plus anything that would be important to the mission to come. The time now 6:17, time for the first radio check. Press transmit button, with a clap clear loud as an order with pauses spoke into the mic. S3, okay. This is followed by, GD, okay. Wasn't a long wait, seemed to last forever, but in reality, was only about 20 seconds before.
TS, okay.
Came over the airways. All 3 of us were now in position. Radio checks out of the way. 2 more tasks needed to be completed first. Need to set up rear protection and tripwire alarm. Now if I was to sneak up on myself, where would I come from? To my right, I could see the direction I approached the position. Chosen this way because it provided me with cover and ease of access. So if I had used it, it makes sense someone else would most probably come this way. To the left of that was another likely route from which people may consider. The solution was simple as a thin branch of a bush was sticking out and upwards between the others. Grabbed the tripwire and transmitter from my Bergen, stopped to listen and watch for a few moments, then proceeded to the right of where I came in from, about 50 meters from the location of the OP. Tied one end of the fishing line to a tree about 25 centimeters from the floor, around the small branch, confirming it had free movement and could not become snagged. The other end with the receiver and clothes peg was attached to a tree to the far left. Once I had inserted the wire into the clothes peg, I went back along the line, ensuring I had not accidentally left any traces of my presence. The second task of placing the homemade claymore would have to wait until after nightfall. This had to be positioned forward of my location. Spotted an old stump almost 50 meters away down a slight incline, which would be perfect. Now back in the OP position, got as comfortable as possible and looked over the target. The observation part of the mission was now entirely underway. The time now 7:30, the only people seen on target were 2 men standing by the water tank between the vineyard and the house. Noted this down on my pad with additional comment, looks like the lazy bastards don't like getting up early. Nothing changed for the next hour until 2 people emerged from the house and stood on the doorstep. From my location, I couldn't see what they were doing. 10 minutes later, they went back inside the house. The small things could be significant in any mission. For example, if the same people came out and stood in the same place and this was happening every day, this might indicate a pattern, such as the time people were getting up. How many people do you know whose first sign of life in the morning is to light up a cigarette? Noted this down on my pad along with the time of 8:30. Just finished the 9:17 check with the boys when a Jeep pulled up outside the house. Sam and a woman I couldn't recognize, but sure it wasn't Abby, got out of the vehicle, spoke to someone before entering the house. Same as before. Noted this down with the time. 10:45. 3 men in their mid-30s dressed in jeans and blue t-shirts enter the warehouse building, resurfacing around 30 minutes later carrying several fully bulging sacks between them and headed towards the vineyard. Past the 2 men still stood near the water tank, then continued into the middle of the neat rows of the vines where they disappeared underneath the plants. Guess they were replanting more crop. 11:05. The woman, accompanied by Sam, left the house, walking in the direction of the gatehouse. Strange, why is he holding this woman's hand? Could see more clearly now. She was around 5 feet 8 inches tall with a figure that wouldn't be out of place on some glamorous modeling shoot. Her long blonde hair reached halfway down her back, dressed in a light blue dress. Lost sight of them crossing the yard. With a bit of luck, George can pick them up from where he was located somewhere near the front gate. Bet that bastard is cheating on Abby. The time passed rapidly as I lay there, as plenty was going on, and I was still fresh. Tonight would be a different completely matter with less going on and the bloody body clock telling you it's past your bedtime. Must have been in my own little world as the radio burst into life.
TS, okay?
Followed by
GD, okay?
Shit, almost forgot about the check-in, fumbled for the radio. S3, okay? That was close. Get your act sorted, idiot. Been lying in the OP motionless, observing for 4 hours now, and the body was telling me I needed to urinate in a public place. I came prepared. Been in too many long ambushes in my lifetime. There are only 2 ways to deal with this, as I couldn't leave the OP for a piss, of course, depending on where you are. In this type of situation, your 2 options are pissing yourself or the place you're laying in, or bring along a big enough empty container. I chose the latter. Would dispose of its contents tonight when it's dark. 12 o'clock. Both Sam and the woman climbed back in the Jeep and drove off, after shaking hands with a well-dressed man around 6 who was standing near the front door to the house. Picked up the binoculars for a better look. It was Hadley. I recognized him from the photo Sam had shown me back at his place. Now, why would Sam be shaking hands with him? Knew there was something about this bloke. 12:25. Another 3 men and 2 women joined the 2 men from earlier in among the rows of vines. One man left the vineyard shortly after, carrying one of the sacks I had seen taken into the field by the others this morning. After a short stop to talk to the 2 armed men at the water tank, he continued on into the warehouse. Thinking about it, this is the first time I had seen anyone with weapons. Not saying they don't, but for some reason not seen anybody carrying any guns, apart from the 2 men at the tank. Besides the hustle and bustle of what's happening down at Henry's place, the whole area was silent except a few birds singing their heads off in the treetops. At this point, the senses started to tingle as the sound of something making its way through the undergrowth. I grabbed the SA-80 and turned my head towards the sound to try and get a better fix. The noise started to grow louder as I took aim, ready to take a shot. While I listened, I detected something approaching. My finger took up the first pressure on the trigger when 2 wild pigs emerged from the trees. That was close. They nearly ambled into my tripwire, setting it off. 1400 hours, a commotion came from the rear of the house. Picking up my binoculars for a better view of what was going on, a stocky woman and Hadley were stood facing another man knelt down with his head bowed forward. Behind him stood a tall man around 6 feet dressed in shorts, a white polo shirt and resting a 9mm on the back of the man's head. From my location, it was not possible to understand what they were saying. But without a doubt, Hadley was shouting and waving at the man on his knees. Seconds later, the distinctive sound of a pistol shot echoed around the grounds, and the man fell face down on the lawn. Ambling over to where the dead body lay, blood oozing from the hole in the back of his head, Hadley took something from his pocket and went back inside the house, closely followed by the other 2. Well, that answers my question on weapons issue and the fact people down there willing to kill for the drugs. Wonder who the man was and what he had done to piss Hadley off so much. Thinking about it, they are all drug related, so who cares? 14:10, 3 people and Hadley leave in a Land Rover. Reached into my Bergen, took out the food parcel Abby had made us all, as feeling a little on the peckish side. Contained within were several meat sandwiches, a couple of oranges, along with some cookies. Well played, Abby. Makes you think why the bastard Sam is cheating on her. Suppose it's not my issue. Nothing much happened for the rest of the afternoon, besides a shift change that occurred around 15:30. Saying a shift change out of habit. In reality, the people in the vineyard went back indoors, and the 2 men who had been near the water tank most of the day had changed over. These were the worst times in an OP, with nothing to keep the brain alert at the quiet times at night, which are a killer. Managed to build up an extensive list of things to keep the mind occupied, from going over nursery rhymes, poems to singing songs, all in the head of course. 18:30 now. That's strange. Hadley's Land Rover had returned. Hadley, Sam, the woman he had left with earlier, and 2 small children around the age of 4 and 9 stepped out. Hope there are no kids about when this all kicks off. Have no issue disposing of any arsehole who deals with drugs, but not at all comfortable with unintentionally killing kids, saying that if it comes to them or me. What was strange, Sam now had his arm around the young lady as they walked into the house. Well, that confirms it to me. The bastard is cheating on Abby, which raises the question, tell Abby or kill the bastard. The light was now starting to fade as it approached 18:30. Sunset will be on us soon, but still plenty of light down on the property. In fact, the place was lit up like a football stadium. Take it they didn't want anyone sneaking upon them. Usually, you get your night vision after 30 minutes or so. That is if the whole place remained in darkness, which it wasn't. Solely for this purpose, I came prepared, brought along an eye patch. Made me look like fucking a pirate, but who cares? Wore the patch over my right eye, as this is the one that would be looking down the optical sight of the SA-80 if it all kicks off tonight. We'll wait until after the 1917 radio check, then go and place my claymore in the old tree stump. George and Simon would be doing the same and setting their own claymores.
GD, okay.
TS, okay.
Reply with my own call sign. S3, okay. Then reached in my bag, pulling out the claymore before slowly, and, without making a sound, crawled out of the location. Spent the next few minutes acclimatizing to the darkness and listening for any sounds of movement. All good so far. After making my way to a position about 50 meters to the right and 10 meters before the ridgeline, laid down and crawled to a place, observed over the ridge, paused for a few minutes before sliding over the rim as flat as possible. Crawled towards a small clump of bushes, again, stopping for a couple of minutes to survey my surroundings and listen for movement. Once I was sure it was safe to do so, continued to the stump. Looked even better than I imagined when I arrived. Laying right in front was part of a rotten stump facing out through the trees in the direction of the property. One thing I didn't spot from the OP. This made it perfect for placement of the gas bottle into the tree. Yes, it might blow small shards of wood everywhere when it went off, but not before bombarding anyone who was approaching with a shower of nails. Strapped the detonator to the side with plenty of duct tape, ensuring the wires were free to be reeled out, and inserted canister into the stump. Crawled back to the small bushes, attached the end of the wire to a rock, then launched it in the direction of the OP, landing just to the left. Arrived back in the location via the same route I took on the way out, again, making sure I stayed as flat as possible while sliding over the edge and back into the tree line. Took out the square battery from my Bergen and located it to the right of my notepad, where I could get to it quickly if required. Attached one wire while ensuring the other was nowhere near the terminal. Didn't want that unexpectedly going off. 20:30 a.m. group of 6 people emerged from the house, one of which was Sam. Splitting into 2 smaller groups, they started to shine powerful torches into the tree line, one in my direction and the other in the path of where Simon would be. Now, this can't be a coincidence that they're doing this with Sam. Hope he hasn't compromised the whole mission. If he has, it will be one of the last things he ever does. This lasted for about 10 minutes, before they gave up and went back indoors, apart from Sam, who jumped in his Jeep and drove off. Must have started to rain about 2 o'clock at first. It was a gentle trickle before opening up into a full-blown tropical rainstorm. Thank God I had lined the inside of my new home with my poncho, or I would be getting soaked. There didn't seem a lot going on, so spent the next hour or so listening to the gentle pitter-patter of rain hitting the poncho. Other strange noises breaking the silence of the night came from the woods, which conjured up moments of fear to play tricks on your mind. Combine this with the stunts your eyes are playing on you. Seeing everything imaginable moving through the night. Of course, the trick here is to filter out what's real and what's not. Wasn't long before the brain slipped into the why was I here stage. Which at the time seemed a valued question. What am I doing here in the pitch darkness of the night? Lying in a wet hole in the ground, watching some drug dealers at work? Couldn't be for empathy for the millions of people using drugs, as that is something that eludes me. My therapist once told me, I'm just a cold-hearted bastard, not wholly accurate. Granted, I don't give a crap about other people's problems. So what if they die? I don't know them, so who gives a shit about them? What I do care about are my family and a few close friends. Maybe it's because I hate things, anything or anyone who are not following the rules. Let's face it, drug dealing is not, for sure, abiding by the guidelines in anyone's book. Now it might be because I have always struggled to get anywhere in life and find it hard to ask for help. I want to assist people without them asking for assistance, similar to the woman yesterday. Could it merely be because I've done this so many times before? It is like a job to me. When it came to the money side of things, recently, one thing was for sure, I definitely needed that, with the travel business not doing that well. Okay, decided I'm here for the dosh. A light that came onto the rear of the house snapped my mind back into focus. A check of the time, it was 4:23, being extinguished about 10 minutes later with no movement spotted, made a note on my notepad. Looked down at Mickey. It would soon be first light, a time all military personnel serving or otherwise cherished, as it brings about the sense they live through another night with no issues. Even if you're deprived of sleep, those first rays reinvigorate you as they welcome you to a new day. Day 2 of observation post. The first lights of the day started to penetrate through the canopy, then the first crackle of the radio on a new day broke the morning silence of a new day.
GD, okay.
TS, okay.
Press the transmit button. S3, okay. Great to hear the boys had made it through the night. Reached into the Bergen and pulled out a small flask, poured out half a cup of coffee. Always amazed how this tiny object could keep liquids warm for such a long time. Especially as it was given to me on an integral cruise of Norwegian bliss. Replaced the flask before reaching in again, this time for one of the cookies Abby provided. One of the things the Army had drummed into you as a recruit was only taking one item out at a time. Then replace it before taking out another, as you never knew when you would be attacked and have to grab your kit and bug out. One thing that always brought a smile to my face, when I thought about this, was the fact if you all ran away together, it's called a tactical withdrawal, but if you ran away on your own, it's called desertion. Held the cup in one hand, sipping on the coffee, picked up the binoculars and scanned the whole property. From what I could perceive, our lazy drug dealers were still getting their beauty sleep, apart from the two on guard near the water tanks. 8:27 Several people emerged into the front yard, stood in a group and started smoking. Checked my notes to confirm, this was about the same time as yesterday. Maybe a pattern is forming, such as this is about the time our drug dealers rise from their slumber. 9 a.m. Group of 4 men and 2 women came from the warehouse and climbed aboard the lorry, and headed towards the gate. A couple of interesting points here, as I hadn't seen anyone enter this morning. They must have slept there last night, something that would be very handy when it comes to the final mission. The second point, at 9 o'clock, 6 people leave the compound, reducing the number of people still on the property to only 14. 9:56 appears another pattern is forming here, same as yesterday. 3 men left the house and entered the vineyard. This information was helping into the start of a plan of attack, of course. Need more info from the other 2 before jumping to any conclusions. Down on the property were the usual activities you would expect from any operation for the next 2 hours, with people coming and going from the warehouse, people going backwards and forwards from the vineyard. In fact, the only movement that was out of the ordinary And something we hadn't seen yesterday was at 10:36, people were seen leading 5 large-looking German Shepherd and Rottweiler dogs from the gatehouse to the field. 12 o'clock the cheating bastard Sam arrived and entered the house, leaving after 6 minutes and made his way into the warehouse. Guess he'd come to fix something. This was confirmed 20 minutes later when the sound of some type of machinery was heard coming from inside. Became apparent we are going to need an idea of the layout of that place. Maybe Abby can help with this. 1300 hours the lorry returned from town. Presumed this was where it had been, as it was now unloading crates from the back. On a closer examination with my binoculars, confirmed it was food, or at least that's what the boxes led us to believe. Sunset would be in about 30 minutes. Needed to collect my claymore before it got too dark, and I had to make my way to the RV following the same procedure as yesterday when placing it into position. Made my way over the ridge to the stump, crawling on my belly. After disarming the device, paused for a moment, using the opportunity to check out the warehouse from a different angle. Glad I did, as I noticed a rear door I hadn't seen before. Back in the OP, ensured everything was packed away apart from the radio, still needed that to send the last check message, plus everyone's signal to bug out. Dead on 1917, sent my message. S3, okay.
TS, okay.
GD, okay.
Guess the boys were ready to call it an end to the observation phase. Final check, everything was away, left the location and proceeded to where I placed my rear protection, carefully removing this and packed it in the Bergen. Now a simple process of making my way down to the track where I was dropped off to wait. By the time I arrived at the edge of the tree line, it was dark, so ensure I stayed inside of tree line until I heard the sound of the Land Rover coming down the trail, as the lights would be off. The area was quiet, so should not be any chance I would miss Simon as he approached. Had just taken out my torch with the red lens when in the distance, the noise of the vehicle's engine broke the morning silence. As it got closer, I gave 2 flashes. The car pulled to a stop close to where I was crouched. George was already on board when I scrambled on board. Morning all, hope you've both had an uneventful OP.